like we were a really good group, but the biggest complaint she had on us is that something would always happen. Someone would lose something. What's good, y'all? Welcome to another episode. We're in a new setting. We have some amazing guests to the side of us. Before we get started with our episode, let's have them introduce themselves.
Yeah, I'm Thaden Williams, and I guess I've traveled, so that's why I'm here.
I'm Luke, and I'm from Canada, and I am planning on becoming a teacher. So yeah,
Yep, traveling
I've
people.
also
Oh, go on.
I've also traveled. I'll just add that.
It's like that's the requirement. All of us need to travel.
True.
So this is our episode on what if? What if traveling was free? What if we got to travel at no expense? What are the benefits? What are the downsides? As people who have traveled a lot, well, I haven't traveled too much. I know Luke, you've traveled quite a bit, and Thaden, you've traveled a lot as well.
Yeah, I thought a little bit about this. Sometimes I feel like the price adds more value to your experience, and I'm thinking, what if travel was free? What if people didn't really get to utilize it because there's not that threshold they have to pass. They're like, oh well, like you're hanging out with your friends. It's like, oh, do you want to go drive over here? And you're just like, eh, you're just lazy and complain. But on the other hand, like if traveling was free, I'm sure a whole lot would change actually, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, I've done quite a bit of traveling, largely in Europe. And I think the money is like a big factor for people, but I was also thinking about the question and thinking about the implications, and I was kind of seeing it as like it'd have to be something tied in with the education system. I don't know how you
Mm.
were thinking about it, Mario, but I don't really see how um the free traveling would be tied in. Like, do you have any thoughts on that?
On the drive over, so originally I was thinking there's a lot of benefits of just traveling because of traveling. Personally, I've traveled a lot these past year and a half to different countries. I've traveled a lot to the States. And although that is traveling, I feel for me, traveling outside the country is more beneficial because it's a whole new culture. And I was looking at it from a perspective of learning new things firsthand versus reading about culture. Like in Germany, there's a lot of books we can read on the history, but being able to see monuments and talk to people in German or at least hear what they've gone through throughout history is something that you get a great impact on. It's something you remember more. Then at the same time, like you said, Dayton, also travel a lot to Northern California, which is a 2 hour flight, but it's also a 6 hour drive. And really enjoy the 6 hour drive just to be able to drive and just go explore.
Yeah, like what you said about education, I think that could tie in a lot, Luke. But imagine if
Hmm.
classes are able to just because you don't have any you don't have to review the pricing through a bunch of boards or anything.
Right.
We can get all these classes of people over to different countries, and they can have a lot more financial leeway on food and housing, um, experiences, museums,
Right.
like you know
Mhm.
that'd be very beneficial actually. Um, Considering because what I was talking about before is like not really having an urge. I think that comes to structure. Like you don't have a structure in your ideas of what you want to do. But if it's through school, then you have someone hired to create an experience and be the guide to an experience for all these young, impressionable people.
Right.
So,
Yeah, because I was thinking like before we start kind of maybe discussing the benefits and things. Yeah, it's just like would it be worth talking about how it would be? implied first, or maybe after, like how this could potentially work if it was a thing. Um, yeah, like, what do you think,
The
Mario?
logistics and how that would work.
Yeah, because I'm kind of interested in that.
Hmm. So let's go on the idea that we have a voucher just so it makes that experience to travel very memorable because it's not going to be an everyday opportunity you get to travel.
Right, right, yeah.
So we can probably go on that idea that every individual or every family has a voucher to travel to a destination. Of course, being able to buy food, buying housing, all the other itinerary and accommodations would be included
Hmm.
for that specific trip. But if there's anything that you want to do outside, that would be at their own expense. I feel like
Right.
that would be good, would you
Yeah,
say?
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I'd like to touch on some points on why travel is beneficial in the first place. And from my own experience, um, you're initially caught caught up in absorbing differences from your original environment to where you are now. Um, but once that fades away and you end up traveling to other locations, I thought the sweet thing to take away was how similar we are in the good ways and in the bad ways. Like, there's always going to be ignorant people. There's always going to be really cheerful people. There's going to be, the low end and high end of society. And it's just interesting how our humanity translates worldwide, despite there being, you know, large gaps.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that actually. I came to a very similar conclusion when I started traveling. I I'd always hear from people like, oh, people from this country are going to be like more like this, and people from other countries are going to be like this. But I think overall, I came to a very similar conclusion in that people are just people, and
Yeah,
a lot of times, the environment is what changes that. So what kind of culture they grow up with, or anything. Um, but yeah, most of the time, just like you said, people are just going to be people. Kind of doesn't really matter where you go.
right. Like, coming from North America, we have a reputation in Europe as being kind of politically ignorant and obnoxious, and you can list so many things. And it's just, yeah, you might be accused of that, sure, but they don't know you as a person. But you can see that exact same behavior in the people that are accusing you of that. So it's like, oh, no, we are just all human. We're all pointing fingers. We're all saying these guys are weird. We're all saying we're cool, you know.
Yeah. Um, and I guess the other big point that I think there is to traveling, at least what I gained from my experience, that maybe I didn't really like see online or anything beforehand, but the biggest one of the biggest takeaways that I took was that it really makes you open-minded to how things can be done differently. Like I
Yeah,
think that if you grow up in one place and you see how everything is done the same way all the time, you don't really see how different things could be doing the exact same thing. Like even just with how the streetlights are made or like crosswalk symbols, even just little things. It's like not everything needs to be one way to work. There are so many different solutions for one problem. And I think that's the biggest thing that I took away is that every country that I'd go to had a slightly different variation for dealing with many different problems. And yeah, that's just one of the biggest things that I took away from traveling.
Definitely. I remember in Germany, and someone and I talked about it quite a bit, is that in Germany, a lot of the things are known for is being efficient with things. So every time Samuel and I would go to a place or go check something out, someone was like, "Oh my goodness, this is so cool. Look how efficient
Mhm.
this is." And I look at it, I'm like, this is very simple and easy. Well, how come we haven't been able to replicate this,
Right. Yeah, 100%.
It's cool. It's being able to
I think
be open-minded too.
Hmm.
I think another thing it adds is this is more pertains to traveling alone, but you end up developing a lot more security within yourself and your and confidence in your ability to kind of handle the unknown. Um, you know, because you could end up being, okay, I'm going to take a flight and we'll figure it out from there. You go up and say, okay, um, you know, food, take care of your food, take care of your housing. And I think in the beginning it's kind of chaotic and you're like, oh, ooh, like freaking out. But once you kind of get some basic reference points down, you can feel pretty secure within yourself.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to say about solo traveling as well,
Yeah.
and the personal development that most people can get from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed how empowered everyone was at Leolingo. Just showing up, everyone's just, I mean, a few of you guys were out for a couple months already traveling, but as Leolingo progressed, I definitely saw a lot more empowerment and like that self-confidence in all of you guys.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, it's true. You can definitely tell the individuals at Lillingo who's traveled a lot and then individuals who are traveling for the first time by themselves.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It creates a great story for the future.
and I do think that it's something that Europeans would be like more used to. I think just because it's so much easier for them to travel to different countries. I mean, at least countries that are significantly different from their own. I mean, like I think a lot of people from Canada can go to the US and US can come to Canada. But you kind of have to go. I mean, you could also go south to Mexico, which is a good option. But to go anywhere else, you kind of have to fly. Whereas I think it's a lot more accessible for people in Europe. Like on my very first trip to Europe, within a few days, I met this like class that was I think in grade 12 or grade 12 equivalent. Most of them were 18 and they were traveling from Germany with their school and staying at this hostel that I was at. So it was really cool to talk to some of them and see what their experience was like with that. But yeah, I
Where
just
was it
think
that you met them?
I met them in Dublin, in Ireland. Yeah,
That's pretty cool. I think
yeah.
I think something that's interesting too when it comes to traveling, of course, especially in countries that or areas that have a primary language that's different from the language you speak. It's intimidating for sure at first, having to read, write, understand a totally different language, but it's also a great way to learn the language as well and learn of the culture a lot. I remember I think it's in linguistics class, we're talking about American Sign Language in the deaf community, that there's sign language, of course, but then there's also a community within that. So I'm sorry, culture, culture and language, they intertwine a lot. So a lot of times when you're learning, and even in school, a lot of times when you're learning languages, you learn about the culture because the way words and the way people speak can be dated back to the culture and why they use certain
Yeah.
tonalities or certain words.
Like you get context from the situation. But what did you want to say, Dave?
Yeah, I was just going to say that just the words you say and how you say words govern how you think. And seeing how different languages are put together and it's like how their thoughts are structured and how um, I guess how those thoughts are communicated totally change. Yeah, totally change the process. So how different people joke, how different people maybe express themselves. Um, yeah, there's a wide variety.
It's pretty funny. I remember you reminded me of when we were at, was it Beckervitz? We had one of the girls, one of the kiddos asked for an ice pack, but obviously she asked for it in German.
Yeah, she asked for a cold battery. I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah, that was a fun moment. That's not as crazy as our fire alarm going off, and we're like, we wake up like, what the hell is that noise? Yeah,
I think what made that story even better is that both you and I, we just did not do anything. We just expected
it
the
was right above our heads, and we're just staying still. And like the ladies upstairs are like coming down, like, what's all going on? And we're just like, we don't want to deal with it. Oh, what's worse is I'm in the fire protection industry, and I could have been doing something. And I'm just like, I'm just out cold or trying to be. I think what happened is like it was so it was so invasive, like the noise was so loud that I think I just tried to reject it. I'm like, I'm not gonna be part of this. Like, don't bulge into my life like that. Alarm. It was, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I still have trauma when I hear the sirens. I think it was our last week when we went to oh my goodness, what was the last place? What was that one place? The last camp you and I worked at, Luke?
Flessino?
Flessino, yeah. When we were in
Yeah.
Flessino, the fire alarm went off, and then I just got PTSD. I'm like, oh my goodness, we gotta turn this off. And I'm like, wait, no, it's okay.
Yeah, I definitely think it was a sort of traumatic. Yeah, because in the dead of sleep, you just have this obnoxious sound blaring, and you don't even know what's happening. It's just,
Well, at least there wasn't any real fire threat. I don't think I remember. So
what if we went around and said one negative and one positive experience we've had traveling?
sure.
Yeah, I'd have to think of something.
Anyone wants to go first now?
Yeah. Um, let's see. This is a mix of both because it was a good adventure, but when I was younger, I was with my mother and we were able to tag along to my sister's class trip to Italy. This is when my dad was working with the military and we were living in Germany. And so it's the very last day. We were there like 3 or 4 days, and we were in Florence, Italy, and we had already seen everything, everything you could possibly see. And one night, like I said, the next morning we are flying home. The night before, we're walking through one of the Times Squares or whatever, and there's these vendors playing with these toys that shoot up in the air and light up. And kind of side note, I guess a lot of people do that to distract them while they get pickpocketed. I heard that's a strategy. But anyway, so I'm like, Mom, I want one of those flying toys. She's like, okay. And we're talking with the guy, we get the thing, and we turn around and our group's gone. We're like, oh crap. So we're trying to coordinate with them. We're texting them, okay, we'll meet you at a McDonald's. And we walk for about an hour to this McDonald's. And there's some like confusion and some texting going on. We're at the wrong McDonald's. I guess there's two McDonald's. So we're okay, we'll try to find the hostel, the youth hostel we're at. And we're walking and we're walking, and everywhere looks familiar. I'm like, oh, I remember this building. We just gotta take a left over there, yada yada. We go down there, nothing. Oh, I remember this statue. We go over there, nothing. We eventually bump into this American couple. They help get us to a police station, and the police have eventually drive us around. And we were we were wandering for 9 hours, and we had a flight to catch. And so my mom's all stressed out. But we're in this police car, and I noticed an ice cream cone, one of those plaster ice cream cones. And I'm like, hey, that's the ice cream cone right next to our youth hostel. And we pull over, and sure enough, we're there. And we go up, we get inside, and we go upstairs, and all the students are like sitting in the hallway with their like head in their hands, just like stressed out about us. So we were walking through, and they're like, "Oh, hey, you finally made it!" Just in time for us to fall asleep, and then yeah, go back home.
Moral of the story, don't get distracted by things.
So I guess that's a mix of both. It's good and bad, but
Yeah, I was trying to think. I was like, was that the good story or I mean, like it had a happy ending, but I wasn't sure if that was the good or bad story. But we got a 2-for-1, I think.
I think so.
2-for-1, bad ending good might be better than just good. Who knows?
It's up to the viewer
Um,
interpretation.
yeah. And I guess I'll give like a couple little stories, and then maybe like, yeah, my big pro, my big con about if um traveling was free or if you had like a one-time voucher. So I guess we'll start with the one bad experience. I was in England, traveling in London, and this was like my second week of my first trip traveling. And something that was probably a little bit disturbing happened in my hostel room. I learned about different stuff online that like weird things can happen at hostels sometimes. Whatever, I was taking the risk, not like I had the money to do anything else. So, yeah, it was, I think I was sick at the time and I had gone to sleep, I don't know, maybe 10 p.m. on a Saturday. And then all of a sudden I wake up and the lights are on in my room. I check the time. It's like 2:30 or 3 a.m. And there are some middle-aged, I'm assuming Eastern European men that come into the room, and they've been out drinking, whatever, they're quite loud. I mean, that's all fine, I would say, other than apart from the light being switched on and the fact that they just kept on talking with like no regard for anyone else in the room. And then one of them decided, heck, why would I go to the bathroom when there's a garbage can sitting right here in the corner where I could just, you know, start using that as a urinal instead. And I almost couldn't believe it. Like I saw I saw him standing over there, and then I just heard the sound going into the garbage can. I was like, is this happening right now? Because I've got nobody with me, right? Like I'm solo traveling, and I'm just like, damn, this is happening right now. And a part of me was upset and angry, but a part of me was also like, well, this is gonna be funny, I think, in the future. So whatever.
Oh yeah,
I guess it's happening, you know? But then they went to bed after, so it was okay. Yeah, that was a negative or more negative experience that I had. And honestly, just so many positive ones to draw from. Like I would say it's for the most part just overwhelmingly positive. But just something that really cool happened at the end of that second trip. I was in Rome, and there were a bunch of solo travelers that just made this group, and we all went out together. We all had dinner at this restaurant. It was a super popular restaurant. Um, I'm surprised they even sat like all 13 of us at the same table. But that was just super cool, just seeing a whole group of people from different countries and different backgrounds and everything. We're all having dinner together. Yeah, that was really sweet. But that was a big positive experience that I had while traveling.
that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
It's a big group. Just trying to figure out like how you're able to sit all those people.
I know, like this is a big restaurant, but it was around peak dinner time and it was super, super popular. So I'm shocked, but it was awesome.
Blessing in disguise. I think
Yeah,
that's the thing. You just gotta group up with a bunch of people.
right. And going back onto whether um like what would the benefit be of traveling? Well, I think the number one con, at least to if you're looking at the perspective of the country, like your country's perspective, is obviously cost. I wouldn't really say there are many other cons associated with it, but I would say the biggest benefit that you could get if you were a country and almost like investing in your country is that you get different ideas, and that like that stems into the open-mindedness, is that you come back and you look at things, or at least I did, and I'm like, okay, like maybe this thing doesn't have to be done this way, or we could do things differently in this way. And it gets you to change the lens on how you see how things are done at home and how they could really be improved with like taking the positives out of the places that you visited and then basically bringing them back with you. Yeah, I'll say that's a really big benefit to traveling.
The benefit of the country, and I kind of put my mind in a space where I was thinking, well, if there's free travel or a voucher, and that does lead to increased travel, that small business would do better because you got a lot more people from all over the world checking out your little shop, your little doner kebab shop, and
Mm-hmm.
you know,
The kebab.
Oh man. I was just talking to someone about that. I'm like, I want to head back to Germany right now and get a kebab.
yeah.
Man, I miss kebab too, man. It's not the same here. Like I like it here, but it's not the same.
Mm.
What about you, Mario?
Mm, I'm trying to think of a really bad experience, but nothing too major because I'm just so used to being spontaneous and just letting things happen. But one thing I do recall, this is my first time traveling outside the country. So I've traveled a lot of places in the States, but I've never traveled outside the country. So this was 2022, I believe. I was over the summer. It was a study abroad to Ireland. So I was supposed to be in LAX, but I was working at a summer camp prior. So I flew from San Jose to LAX, and from LAX, I would travel with our squad of students. And along the travel from San Jose to Dublin, my suitcase disappeared.
No.
So apparently, I found out later that the suitcase was left at LAX, and just never made it to Dublin. So I think for the first 3 days, I didn't have. Luckily I had clothes just for the day, um, for the next day or two. So it was pretty fun not having any of the stuff that I had packed for like for camp or for the study abroad. But
Yeah, geez.
it was fun.
Did they send it back eventually or?
Yeah, they did. So
Yeah, right. Yeah.
one of the things ironically was this mic. So I was planning to do a couple podcast episodes when I was out there, but obviously without the mic, I couldn't do an episode. But ironically, as soon as I got the mic, I recorded their episode right after. So it worked
No.
out. And then I found out too at certain airplanes, certain
Carrier service or no, what's it?
airline, right?
Yeah,
Airlines?
airline
Yeah.
service.
Yeah, okay. Like there's a specific term. Okay, so airlines. So certain airlines that they reimburse you if your suitcase or your luggage is missing. So luckily the professor in charge, she lived in Ireland for a while too. She's a third generation Irish individual. So she knew the ins and outs of what to do. And she told me that I can just apply or file a claim that my baggage was missing, and I would basically buy the all the stuff that I would need, the essentials I would need for that moment, and then before I fly back, I would submit the refer file a report,
Oh,
and then I'll get the money back, which I ended up doing. So I got, I think, a couple nice outfits. So
Nice.
turned out to be a good thing.
Yeah.
Nice. And you got your luggage back, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, not too
that was a
bad,
lot of
not
fun.
too bad. You know, that's something that like I was really worried about happening when I went traveling, which is why I was like doing everything I could to just take a carry-on because I was like, I don't want to lose my luggage. I don't want to lose my luggage. So that's cool that that happened to you and it ended up being like kind of positive in the end. So yeah.
Yeah, that was the first thing that went through my head is like, well, first time I traveled out of the country and I already lost my stuff.
Boom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was great. It was great. Ironically, our professor told us that we were a really good group and we were a really good group, but the biggest complaint she had on us is that something would always happen. Someone would lose something on the ride back from the hostel back to the airport so we can fly home. The bus broke down.
Oh
So just
yeah.
a bunch of unfortunate things that happened to us. So it was pretty funny. So it was probably a coincidence or a foreshadow of the summer. So
Yeah, like you'd never wish something like that on someone, but there's a lot of takeaways in those kind of adventures. Like I've had a situation where I had to transfer trains. I was trying to get back to Villagrad actually. So I was in where was I? I think I was in Berlin. I forget.
yeah, I think you guys were
Trying-
because you and San Juan were in Berlin.
yeah, this was actually the year prior,
Oh,
and I'm trying to get back to Schwerin, and I get off this train to transfer, and me and this one guy are just sitting at this platform, and nothing's happening, nothing's happening, and we turn around, and there's a sign saying that there's no trains coming to this platform. We're like, oh, what the hell? So we find out what train we need to take, and it's like, oh man, it's gonna be like 2 hours wait, and I guess it's only about an hour drive. So he's like, hey, I'm gonna call my friend. He's gonna come pick us up. Would you like to come with us? I'm like, perfect. That's wonderful. Thanks, man. And he's like, well, in the meantime, one of the cousins or a duke or some royalty from Schwerin set up like a little estate and a cathedral here. So let's go check it out. I'm like, right on. So we walk through the town and he starts talking about neo Nazis. He's like, yeah, there's a guy at the train station that was wearing this sweatshirt and it's representing this band who has like all these neo-Nazi ideologies anyway. So we started talking about politics and that. But we get to this place and it's a it's a small church, but you go inside and oh man, it's beautiful. Like the walls, there's 3 layers to the walls that they had painted so the clouds would come out. This thing was beautiful. And so I'm sightseeing with a total stranger. And we're just talking it up. And his friend comes and picks us up in this really odd car, some French car. Okay. And his friend is French. And he starts talking to me about it. He's like, oh yeah, like it's really fancy. It's from like the 80s. He's like, the suspension holding up the car is able to like move hydraulically, but if that fails, it's also tied to the brakes and the steering. So everything will go at once. I'm like, all right, all right. And we get on the Autobahn, and this guy has it totally floored. Like the RPMs are like locked at the very end. Like you can't go any faster than that. We're just hauling ass. And it turns out that the guy that picked us up, he is the historian for the Schwerin Castle. And he just started the job like 2 weeks ago. So he's a new transfer for the job for the Schwerin Castle. That was
Wow.
story. Yeah.
That's super cool.
crazy.
Yeah, that even just being on the highway like that and driving like that legally is something that would have been cool to have experienced in Germany, I'd say.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to take my dad's car out on the Autobahn one. And he was like, limited to 120. I'm like, okay, like 120 kilometers, that's about like 65 miles an hour. He's like, no, miles an hour, limited to 120 miles an hour. I'm like, what? So we're hauling ass. It was
Yeah,
cool.
you just zoom in.
Yeah. But I've got kind of a funny youth hostel story too. I I was with an ex Leolingo counselor, and he was leaving for Korea, and so he was leaving from
Oh,
Berlin, and so on the weekend I went to go visit him at his youth hostel, and we just walked around the town with a beer in our hands, just chatting life up. It's great. So time to check in the youth hostel. It turns out I had booked it for the wrong weekend, and I had booked my booking was for the following weekend, and it was totally
ah,
sold out. And I'm like, oh no, I'll be sleeping on the floor, man. This sucks. So we walk around, keep walking, get more drinks. Ends up being like 4 in the morning, and we're a little tipsy. He's like, hey, maybe if we just go to my room, there'll be a bed available and you could use that. I'm like, okay, good idea, good idea. And we go, and luckily right above him, the bunk bed is available. I'm like, sweet. So I nuzzle in and I totally conk out. Then like hours go by, like wee hours in the morning. I start hearing like psst, like someone trying to get my attention, but I was so drunk and I was so reluctant. I just kind of ignored it. And across the room, there's like two beds just side by side. And I wake up in the morning and there's four people in those two beds. I had stolen their bed and they were trying to wake me up to kick me out, but I just ignored
oh
them.
my God. Wow,
Yeah. So that was fun.
that's a pretty wild story. But I could definitely see how you would have been reluctant. I feel like when I saw you knocked out a few times summer, it was like, I feel like it'd be pretty hard to move that guy when he's out.
Yeah.
You remind me of the Samuel's comment about your pecs.
That guy is hilarious. He started a Snapchat streak with me, but I have a hard time maintaining those, but I still try to send pictures once in a while. He'll
Oh,
send
that's cool.
pictures of his feet or something while he's walking to school. And I think that's kind of boring. So I send him pictures while I'm on like the toilet or something, with some goofy filter.
Are the dogs out when he's walking to school?
Probably.
I
I
mean,
forget to look.
like, is he wearing flip flops to school?
Yeah. His commuter flip flops.
Have you ever seen him with shoes?
I don't think I've ever seen his shoes.
Didn't he wear shoes when we went to Berlin? I thought he wore shoes when we went to Berlin
That's
because
impossible.
he wanted to like get into somewhere.
Hmm,
I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
I think he
possible.
was.
Hmm,
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, in about 15 minutes, I have an appointment at a spa.
True, no
Ooh,
worries. So it sounds like we could actually
nice.
end it. We can end it here. Allow you to go travel and allow other people to go travel too.
Yes, go
Yeah.
travel. Do it
So
while you can.
do it while you're young. Get in debt just for a little bit for that experience.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or even if you feel like you might be a little too old for it now, go do it. It's still really fun. Your way.
I
Mhm.
agree. It's a
Yeah,
good sentiment.
yeah. And always remember when you're traveling, PSA, pass a smile, stay safe, always be awesome. See y'all next time.
See ya.
See ya.
Cool. Well, he actually left.